recording just to make sure it goes off without a hitch, and it did.
Okay.
So we
Go ahead,
are now
Janine.
live.
Okay. Hi, Scott. Hi, Nick.
Want me to start with roll call?
I'm back.
You're back? Okay. All right, I guess we can do roll call. Oh, you know what? I don't have my agenda for some reason. Oops. You're going to have to prod me. I don't have it.
Okay. Mayor Jacobs?
Got on mute, Larry.
Unmute? Okay, all right. Janine?
Okay. Mayor
Janine's not
Jacobs?
here.
Good. Committeeman Hickey?
Here.
Mr. Strackhoff?
Here.
Mr. Travellini?
Unmute, Rich.
Here.
There you go.
Mr. Leonard?
Here.
Mr. DiGiovanni?
Here.
Mr. Zupnik?
Present.
Ms. Arabana?
Here.
Mr. Walter?
Here.
Chairwoman Gutschall?
Here.
Open public meeting statement. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Bedminster Township Land Use Board was filed with the Township Clerk and sent to the Bernardsville News and the Courier News and to all subscribers, and posted at the Township Municipal Building, 1 Miller Lane, Bedminster, New Jersey, on January 16, 2020.
Okay, we have the flag salute. We have our flag with the mayor there.
Yes, everyone look at Larry.
Everybody look at Larry. There we go. I
Okay.
pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America and to the republic
Which it
that
stands
stands one
one
nation
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty,
with liberty
liberty,
and justice
for all.
for all.
smooth.
All right, okay. Janine, I apologize. I am not used to printing my agenda and I didn't have it. Do we have any minutes? I don't think so, right?
We have no minutes, we have no correspondence, we have no resolutions,
Resolutions?
so the next thing would be public comments.
Okay, I'll open it up to the public if they have anything that they would like to bring up that's not on the agenda tonight. Seeing anybody, Janine?
I am not seeing anyone for public comment.
Okay, then we will close that portion. And next on the agenda,
We have Bedminster Farms under determination of completeness. Paul?
okay, Paul?
I'm sorry, 1 second. I was just distracted. I just got a text message from Frank. He's looking for the link. Can you send that to him, please, Janine?
Yes, I can.
Okay. For completeness, we have the Bedminster Farms application. I wrote a letter dated June 5th. I'm sorry to update the completeness on that. In that, the primary comment I had was that the application was as submitted was for 9 lots. Based on the approval of the Board of Health, there are really 8 lots that have been approved by the Board of Health at this point. So it'd be my opinion that the application could be deemed complete for an 8-lot subdivision where 2 of the lots are merged, specifically 1206 and 1207.
Okay, I guess we need a motion to approve the completeness. If I hear a motion,
So moved.
Well, Before we make that motion, I do have
Yes.
some questions for Paul on the completeness. So Paul, you said you would recommend deeming it complete for the 8 units that were addressed by the Board of Health. Is that the application? What is the application tonight?
Well, it's my recommendation that if the board were to hear the application tonight, it would be for 8 lots. If the applicant wants to make a 9-lot subdivision application tonight, it's not complete.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
If I, Madam Chair, Mike Lavery, representing Bedminster Farms, if I may. We have gotten some of the testing back on that one lot that's a problem, so we will be submitting that shortly. I don't anticipate that we're going to finish tonight, so we would like to proceed with the 9-lot subdivision and provide the perk testing and the other documentation as soon as we receive it.
How does the board feel about that? Do we want to go forward? Paul, what do you say?
Well, I know that there was additional testing out there. I just know that the Board of Health has not seen it yet. Literally, it was done in the last 24 hours.
Might I weigh in on the applicant? Could I speak? Would it be okay?
Yes, please.
Not yet, sir.
I have to be sworn.
Only if you are sworn and only when you are sworn. We're not even in a hearing, so there's really no witnesses.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Well,
Madam
we could
Chairman,
start the process, I guess, but I don't think we will finish tonight. Obviously, we can't.
right, and I think Paul's explanation at the beginning was right on the nose. The board, to protect the record here, should deem the application complete. If it is going to deem it complete at all, the board should deem it complete as a 8-lot subdivision application, because the 9th lot has to be merged. 1206 and 1207 have to be merged, in part because they do not have Board of Health approval, but also because there's no demonstration that the 9th lot could have an individual sewage disposal system in accordance with the Chapter 199 of the state law. So that does not mean an application cannot be amended at a future time, but it does mean that for tonight's hearing, if we were to deem it complete, you would only be hearing it as complete as an 8-lot subdivision. I don't have any problem with that, but that is the board's discretionary call. And just because they've done some additional testing doesn't overcome the problem.
Mr. Leary, do you have a problem with going forward in that manner?
No, I don't. I think that's acceptable. We would just, as soon as we get the testing back, we can amend the application, because again, I don't believe we're going to finish tonight anyway, so that would be acceptable to the applicant. I appreciate the board's accommodation.
So if there is such a motion, it would be the motion to deem the application complete for a 8-lot subdivision, as explained by Mr. Ferraro and Mr. Collins, and questioned by the board.
Okay, so we had a motion by Scott for 8 lots. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. We need to have a roll call, Janine.
Okay, so unmute yourself as I call you. Mayor Jacobs?
Aye.
Committeeman Hickey?
Aye.
Mr. Strackhoff?
Aye.
Mr. Travellini?
Aye.
Mr. Vodelius?
Aye.
Mr. Leonard?
Aye.
Mr. DiGiovanni? Unmute Lou, I'm sorry.
Lou, you there?
Spacebar works for temporary let off, Lou.
There you go. How about that?
That's
Yes,
good.
Mr. DiGiovanni?
Aye.
Mr. Zupnik?
Aye.
Ms. Arbana?
Aye.
Mr. Walter?
Aye.
Chairwoman Gutschall?
Aye. Motion is
Okay.
passed.
Now we need everyone to mute themselves except for the applicant who's going to be speaking.
Janine, are we ready for the applicant?
Yes, we don't have any ordinances. We don't have any master plan business or old business, new business, and this is the public hearing for Bedminster Farms. Will be next on the agenda.
Fine. Okay, good. Thank you, Paul. Okay, Mr. Leary, I think you need to start.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Michael B. Lavery from the firm of Lavery, Salvaggi, Abramitis & Cohen, representing the applicant, 1120 and 1310 Lamington Road, LLC. The project's known, as you know, as Bedminster Farms. It's a application for preliminary and final major site plan approval to create 8 residential building lots on Block 39, lots 12, 15, and 21. We have 3 variances that Mr. Kennedy, our engineer, will discuss shortly. And tonight I have 2 witnesses, Jim Downs, who's one of the principals, and then Ron Kennedy, of course, of Gladstone Design, who's our professional engineer and professional planner. So without any further ado, I'd like to swear in Mr. Downs to give a brief introduction and then go to Mr. Kennedy if there's no objection.
That's fine.
Okay.
Mr. Downs, please unmute your mic, and Janine unmute his mic. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
So help me God. I do.
I guess, could you verbalize that a little louder?
Yes, I do. Can you hear me
Thank
okay?
you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, now I can. And please state your name and spell your last name and give us an address.
My name is James M. Downs. Downs is D-O-W-N-S. And my address is 44 Prentice Lane in Mendham Borough, New Jersey, 07945.
Did everybody hear Mr. Downs? I know I'm having difficulty.
Not well, not well.
Not well. Scott, do you know how he can turn up his volume a little? Do you know?
Actually,
They actually just have to get a little closer to that microphone. It's what it sounds like to me.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
let's see what I can do here. Hold on a second, guys. I was trying with the laptop.
That's better. That's better.
Better? Okay, great.
Could you please repeat your address?
My address is 44 Prentice Lane in Mendham, New Jersey, 07945.
All right, Jim, could you just give a brief overview of our vision for this project to the board?
Well, anyway, guys, thanks for being here. Thanks for doing this on Zoom. I know that this is our new normal. I've been doing this probably 4 out of 7 nights a week in some capacity, and I'm sure we all have been doing this. Wish I had stock in Zoom. In any event, I wanted to share with you my vision for Bedminster Farms. We came before you 3 years ago. At that time, we purchased the property that is known as Lot 15. We got preliminary subdivision, and at the time, in order to perfect that subdivision, we would have built a private driveway in excess of 1,000 feet long and crossed over the Hoopstick Brook. At that same time, just after our approval, we became aware of another foreclosure. The property we bought was derelict for a long period of time. I think my realtor I saw was on here in a bit, and Roger showed it to us probably 5 times over 6 or 7 years. And then we became aware of a short sale, and one of our neighbors and another neighbor approached us and said, we love what we heard you talk about in building an agri-hood and sustainable farm to table type of arrangement. And, we're doing nothing with this landlocked piece, and we can't seem to find anybody to buy our other home. And so we aggregated 3 properties. And if I could just take you through that. Anyway, I do also want to thank the Board of Health. I do want to thank the Environmental Commission and the Agricultural Committee, all of whom were very helpful and supportive, both with their positive votes, but all their encouragement along the way. This is a pretty unique time, and being that I'm a sustainability and energy engineer now in my 40th year, things that I never thought would happen are happening, and yet I was kind of the guy that has been saying clean air, clean water, clean food, sustainable infrastructure is important. We ought to be listening to this. So as a consultant in the energy space and sustainability space, as well as a luxury designer and builder, these last 4 months has me scratching my head saying, well, I didn't really want it to ever get this bad. We've all been forced to realize that, our connection to our supply chain isn't what we thought it was. And instead, a hyper-local connection to our food and other resources is the kind of thing that we're returning to both understand now and to demand. And in many cases, having things like edible landscape or a community garden or a local farmer's market is overshadowing the desire for other more luxurious, luxury amenities. I know we need to get to Ron Kennedy to jump into the site plan and start discussing important issues of the land use plan. And I just wanted to give you a sort of brief 5-minute on what my vision for Bedminster Farms is and what we started to create. Bedminster Farms is, in a word, an agri-hub. Now, while I don't like that term any more than most people I know, I wish there was a better term for it, but it is the embodiment of taking environmentally sensitive areas coupled with agricultural areas and enhancing the management of them in order for neighbors to enjoy a healthy lifestyle, living on a sustainable, biodiverse farm property, building community around the food that is grown or raised there. We accomplished this at Bedminster Farms by providing agricultural and environmental easements to the properties that will be maintained for the various agricultural elements that provide basically an amenity farm, as opposed to tennis courts, pools, and clubhouses. Barns, chicken coops, my personal favorite, horse trails, sheep and horse pastures, orchards, and the community gardens become the neighborhood amenity. All required inputs, the idea of organic and sustainable is that all required inputs are grown on site, composted, recycled to provide all the nutrients to the soil in a closed loop system for the plants that ultimately become food for the animals and for residents. Is it possible to put up our plan? I don't have the ability to share a document, but if I could ask Ron.
I was going to ask Mr. Kennedy if he does have the ability to do that, so he'll be able to point to things and show us areas.
Ron, can you do that?
Yeah, if you you got to give me permission, I can put an exhibit up.
Why don't we swear in Mr. Kennedy as well, because he just talked. So,
Yeah.
Gentlemen, you can go out of order, but just try to remember you're both going to be sworn and you'll both be subject to cross-examination. So, Mr. Kennedy, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the statement you gave and the statement you are going to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
And please state your name and address and spell your last name.
Certainly. Ronald Kennedy, Kennedy, 265 Main Street in Gladstone.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Will confirm for the record that the board recognizes and accepts the qualifications of Ronald Kennedy as a professional engineer and professional planner. Please go ahead and share the exhibit, Mr. Kennedy, and describe what it is, I guess.
Tom, I think Janine has to share the screen with me first before I can put it up.
Okay.
I did
You did?
hit share all.
Okay, let me try. So Jim, that's the existing conditions. Do you want that map?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. Tom, do you want me to describe it?
Yeah, why don't you identify it, and if it's already been submitted previously, it won't get a new number, but if it's new, it'll have to be introduced and given an exhibit number. So is it new?
It is new.
Okay, so that'll be for identification purposes only for now. Exhibit number 1. And just describe, maybe name what it is, Ron, and then describe
Certainly.
it.
It's entitled Aerial Exhibit. The date is June 11th, 2020. And it's essentially the state aerial map that you look at Google Maps, and it has the outline of the existing conditions on the property.
Thank you. That'll be identified for now, and it may become in evidence after Mr. Kennedy's testimony is complete. So Mr. Downs, you were wanting to use this, so if you would like to, please go ahead.
Sure, thank you very much. So outlined in yellow are three shapes that represent the three lots that we acquired and put together to form Bedminster Farm.
Really still having difficulty hearing you, sir.
Yeah, it is difficult.
I wish I knew where the microphone was. Is that any better?
Do you perhaps have a headset from a cell phone with a mic on it that you could plug into your laptop?
This is actually a desktop now.
Yes.
Ah, so the mic is probably part of the camera.
Okay. I'm using this every evening. Still having a problem hearing you.
Yeah, you're a little muffled. Yeah.
I wish I could try to log in vis-a-vis the my laptop and see if the laptop would work better. In the meantime, I could have Ron jump into other testimony if you feel like you really can't hear me very well.
Yeah, why don't you try that, because it is difficult to hear.
Jim, as an alternative, you can log in, dial in with your cell phone, use your cell phone for verbal, and mute your computer connection.
Let me see if I can do that, guys. I'll try that in a second. One tap mobile. Would that be the way to do it?
The phone number, Jim, for New York is 646-55. You got it?
Who was just talking?
That was Jonathan Clement.
Oh, okay, Jonathan. Jonathan, you're an attorney, correct?
Yes, but I'm really more on the principal side here. I'm not representing the applicant in this application. I am a trustee for the owners of some of the lots.
Okay. If you talk again, or if you'd like to testify, you have to be sworn, but for now, I'm going to treat it as a representation of counsel, not testimony.
Okay, I seem to be out.
Please don't do, anyone else, please don't speak out of turn, okay?
I believe I'm on.
Jim, you've got two sound sources going on and it's echoing, so you're going to have to get something taken care of there because we really can't hear anything.
Could we mute Jim and have Ron start his testimony?
Well, it's still feeding back because Jim has the sound sources that are looping through. Unless Jim mutes both sources, we're going to get the feedback.
Yeah, well, he's trying to figure that out. This is Mike Lavery. Maybe we just go to Ron and then he can chime back in if he figures that out.
I'm ready to start if the board is.
Yes, go ahead, Ron.
Okay, thank you. So both Mike and Jim just started with the general nature of the application, and I'm going to take a couple minutes just going through this Exhibit A1, and I'll get some orientation to where we are, and then I'll zoom in on the lots, and then we'll talk about the other components of the application. Just for a point of reference, north arrow is pointing in a downward direction on this exhibit. Lamington Road is left to right on the bottom of the exhibit where my pointer is. I'm assuming you can see that pointer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then Larger Cross Road, the intersection at Larger Cross, is on the left side of the drawing where my pointer is. So this is Larger Cross South, and then across the street of Lamington, Larger Cross North. The area is prominently single-family residential estate lots with farming and agricultural use surrounding all three lots. The lots that we're talking about are, the first one is the large lot to the rear. It's lot 12, lot 39, what we call the Dewey lot. That's an agricultural lot that's to the rear of the property. No residential, no structures on that particular site at all. The lot 1120 is where, in the center of the plan here, that fronts on Lamington Road. That was part of that application that I believe Mike talked about back in 2017, that we sought a relief and some variances for a 2-lot subdivision of that lot. That is part of this application. And the third lot is lot 21, the Vreeland lot, that comes in off of Lamington Road as well, oddly shaped, long and skinny, that has a driveway from Lamington that goes back to its house site that's in the center of the property. So the 3 lots total just about 114 acres of all 3 of the existing tracts. An existing house on lot 21, and then there is the existing house on lot 15 that's been abandoned for some time, and the approval that was sought and received last time would be the same premise, that we would remove that existing building and then have an enhanced setback of 400-foot front yard setback to Lamington Road. But I'll dive into that a little more. When I zoom in on each lot, and I'll start with lot 15, takes a second to regenerate. You have the Hoopstick Brook that comes across the property, and we'll have an environmental constraints map that'll show the details. But the Hoopstick Brook, the front part was essentially a horse farm that was on the property, with the house towards the front of the lot itself. You had a pond that was built halfway back on the lot, a wooded area, generally in the environmentally constrained area, and then there was a farm field to the rear. The other predominant feature out there is the electrical substation that P&L owns just adjacent to this lot. When we go over to lot 21, there's an existing driveway that comes in off of Lamington Road where my pointer is, and it comes back into the center of the property. And there's a fairly significant house that's in the center of the property with the driveway to the front, and there's also a driveway to the side to the garage area. To the rear, there's a barn, there's a shed. Just to the rear of the house, I'll zoom in a little farther, there is a small cottage that's there, an accessory dwelling unit. There's no intent to keep that. There's no intent to have a second accessory or an accessory dwelling unit on the property. And we would say that would be demolished as part of any approval of this project. So we're not getting into any use variance associated with that condition. I go to the rear of the project. Let it regenerate for a second. The right side of the property, generally west, is a wooded area. There is a conservation easement on it to the Upper Raritan watershed that was granted by the owners of the property to the watershed quite a number of years ago. I'd say about 20, 25 years ago. You can see the middle brook that's associated with the eastern property line, and you see a series of open fields that are around the property. I want to go to another exhibit. Tom, this will be new as well.
Okay, this will be identified for now only as Exhibit 2, A2, I guess.
And I'll get the title. I gotta zoom back out. The title is going to be Environmental Constraints Exhibit. Same date, June 11th, 2020. Same orientation that we had before, but it's zoomed in a little farther. But Lamington's on the bottom of the sheet. Off the sheet and to the left is Larger Cross Road. And again, it's just zoomed into a larger scale. On this exhibit, the intent is to show the environmental constraints throughout the property. We have on the right side, the hoop stick that travels from the terminus up on Dunwalk, travels on the eastern side of this property, goes off the property by lot 12. That's adjoining the Trump Golf Course. That's where my pointer is now. And the stream is on the Trump Golf Course at this portion. And then you have the Middlebrook that's on the left side of this sheet, and the two join one or two properties to the south. They join together before heading into the north branch of the Raritan River. Both stream corridors have the typical floodplains, riparian buffers, flood hazard areas, and wetlands along those stream corridors. They've been identified on this map. And one of the principal items that I think Mr. Lavery talked about at the beginning of the application, and a reason we're not going to be done tonight, is the letter of interpretation for two of the lots has not been received as today. It's been inspected, it's been verified, but we actually don't have that letter of interpretation. And some of the buffers have slightly changed that we will have to do some of the constraints mapping for the resource calculations and update those maps. But I want to go through generally the areas that we're talking about. So on lot 12, again, on the western side or right side, you'll see a series of lines here. The shaded area represents wetlands. The green shade represents 150-foot transition area. As that magenta outline is the area associated with the flood hazard of the Hoopstick Brook. This other more pink line represents that conservation easement to the Upper Raritan watershed that generally is in the center or wooded section of lot 12. Constraints down on lot 15 are similar to what we discussed last time. With the stream corridor, there's a pond, wetlands around the pond, riparian buffers, and flood hazard lines that are around there. Over on lot 21, along the stream corridor, the typical flood hazard lines, riparian buffers, wetlands. And some of those wetlands buffers, in some cases, are 150 foot. In other cases, they are 50 foot. And we have some that are ordinary, like a small wetland pocket in the rear of lot 21 that will have no transition area or zero buffer. On the eastern side of lot 12, you can see the brook itself. You can see the different buffers associated with that. Wetlands component comes up into the lot that is treed and not cultivated for agricultural purposes, and that's a wetland area. And in that area, it only has a 50-foot transition area or buffer to it. So that'll be a key component, obviously, in any proposed development that we're talking about here.
Okay, does the board have any questions for Ron, the engineer, up to this point?
I'll ask each one individually. Larry, do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, I do have a question for Ron. So, Ron, the nature of that conservation easement to Upper Raritan watershed and the other constraints, are those non-developable areas?
Well, your ordinance for your resource classifications take into some components of what I'm showing on this plan, and other components it doesn't take into account. So one of the things that it doesn't take into account is on a stream corridor, a riparian buffer is not in your calculations. Wetlands, wetlands transition areas, flood hazard areas, 100-year flood plains are in your restriction calculations. So there's areas on this map that I would say would qualify for a riparian corridor under DEP's rules. But for the most part, it would also be either a wetlands or a wetlands transition area that would be captured anyway, because they just overlay each other. Now, there could be some examples in this particular property that you could have a riparian corridor outside of any of the other regulated areas and wouldn't count in your resource classifications. What we can do in those buffers, as we all know, not a lot, but you do have certain rights that you can get, either permit by rules, general permits, or individual permits to do certain things in the wetlands and in those riparian corridors or flood hazard areas. The easement for IRWA, while it is a private easement from the landowner to IRWA, the way your ordinance is written is conservation easements that are part of a site plan or subdivision application would be, I'll say, excluded from developable areas. But in this case, it is not one that was during a site plan or subdivision process. So we wouldn't include that in the calculation for this area that I'm pointing to, that's certainly free of wetland or floodplain, but has the conservation easement in it.
Mayor, anything else?
No, thank you.
Any other board member have any questions for Ron?
I have
Up to
a
this
question.
point. Yes, Rich.
First, a kind of obnoxious one, Ron.
Go ahead.
Why isn't north up?
That's an interesting question. I guess that's one more of look, Lamington Road being, along a single plane and how we develop the site plans for it. It's just all the plans that we put together for you, the detailed engineering plans were that way. If I put an exhibit together where I have it north, then everyone on the board is going to be rotating their plans when they're looking at the plans because they don't make sense to me. So I guess I'm being consistent to how we submitted our application.
All right. So let me understand. Can I ask you to let me control the cursor for a second?
Sure. I'm not sure if I have to do something or you can just take control of it.
Well, I'm requesting control.
Okay. And I'm going to hit
right.
approve. I just did approve. So you should have control now.
Okay. So if I understand this right, on lot 12, this outline is where you could do improvements. This little piece here is where you can do improvements.
We're not seeing any cursor, Rich, right now.
What?
We're not seeing any cursor right now.
You're not seeing my cursor?
No.
I think he has to be the presenter in order to see his cursor.
I'd have to be the presenter?
I believe so,
Yeah.
yes.
Now it's visible.
It's visible now.
Yeah, I
Rich.
put it back on my screen.
Oh,
See it?
okay.
You see me making circles?
No.
No. Try to talk it through, Rich, and let Ron control.
Okay, so inside the magenta lines from the concert in lot 12, inside the magenta lines.
In here.
Where the conservation is, Rich?
All right, so I'm going to say west, but it's east, right?
Over here? East is over here.
Yeah. East, in that eastern area, within that magenta space there.
Yes.
All right. And then there's a little triangular piece that's seems to be on the lower left of 12.
Right here.
Right. No, to your To my east, your west, I guess.
This way?
There you go.
I think right or left might work.
There you
Yeah.
go. Yeah. To the right. That space, the bigger space to the further right, across from the riparian limitations.
This space?
That's your developable pieces of 12, right?
Yep, and all here.
Right, all of that. Now go to lot 15 for a second. Lot 15. So there's a
that's it.
piece on the upper part of 15 and on the lower part of 15 that is developable,
Correct.
right? And then go to 21.
And that's all in here.
And
Mhm.
21 is all good except for the
Well,
extreme
you got
left-hand side
room
of
all
it,
in, down here.
right?
Yep.
Okay,
There
so
are some wetlands in the center of that, right where the cursor is now. So
yeah,
it's not
so-
just that magenta line. You have to look
okay,
at the,
that little magenta, that is wetlands there?
That is. That's outside the magenta line.
Okay. So I guess what I want to understand from this plan, since you've reviewed that with us, there is roughly, what did you say? Over 100 acres between the three lots right now?
114.
How much of the 114 is developable based on the constraints you've described?
Well, again, I'll go back to a couple of things. You have a resource classification criteria, and you have factors associated with that. So in a floodplain, you're basically saying 100% of that is taken out of the equation. So if I had a 10-acre lot, exactly 10 acres, and I had a 2-acre floodplain, you got to take all that, and there's only 8 acres of developable area.
Yeah.
If I have a wetlands, same thing. There's a factor of 1. But things like a transition area, it's a factor of 0.75. So you got to put it in that formula to really figure out what the net developable acreage is for your calculations in your ordinance.
So even when you use that factor though, so let's say half of that was considered a partially constrained area, right? So if 5 acres was only partially constrained, and by the math of it, you'd have 2.5 acres of developable space, but can you put foundations in that area? Can you, excavate for basements and things like that in that area? Or you have to limit the type of development that you're doing in that area?
Well, it's two different things. Your calculation says one thing, and practically what you can do is something, different. I mean, the thinking was,
all right, so I'm all about the practical.
okay. Yeah, you're not gonna build a house in the middle of the wetland or the floodplain. I'm not gonna get permission to do that. That's practical. But I could get permission to do a crossing through a wetland. I could get permission to do a crossing through a stream corridor, and that's going to be a road. It's not going to be building, but it's going to be a road or driveway or other components or a horse trail. We get that all the time for all different types of applications. But the notion that you're going to have 10 acres of unobstructed, non-environmentally constrained area, that's not what your ordinance says.
Right.
Okay, you have this formula that previous boards put a lot of time in to figure out what they think that should be in the R10 zone. And that's what some of these calculations are based on. Unfortunately, because there is a change in some of these buffers, I don't have those updated calculations. So I need to give those, add them to the plans, and then we can talk about that at a future meeting. So then I can give you harder numbers to say, 4.2, 2.8, 10.6, and I can give you specific numbers on some of those areas that you're going to ask me for, because you're going to want to know what's the developable area that's unconstrained.
Right. That's right.
Right now, because they changed, and as I said at the beginning, we don't have the piece of paper in our hand yet. We're expecting that. We expected it a month ago. But because of lots of reasons going on at the state, similar to every business, we just don't have that.
I'm
Ron,
looking at your 19-page plan review here. I guess that was you. I think it was you who put that together, right? That's your document?
Which one, Rich? The actual drawings themselves?
Yeah, the 19 pages of documents that we received.
Yeah.
All right, I'm looking at a zoning tabulation at the bottom of the first sheet.
Yes.
And the newly created lots would be the remaining 12, lot 1206, lot 1207, lot 1208, lot 1209, 15 and 15-1, 21 and 2104. Is that correct?
Almost. The fact that in the beginning of this presentation, we said that two of the lots, I think it was 1206 and 1207, because the Board of Health didn't give approval on 1206, at least for this discussion, we're combining those two.
Okay.
Rich, I think you're getting ahead of us. Let's just let Ron continue on in a
All right, but
basis, okay?
just quickly, then I'll
Yes.
give up my control and everything. The intent is here that each of those individual subdivisions would be at least the 10 acres.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, every lot, physical gross lot would be in excess of 10 acres. There's
Okay.
no lot that would be under 10 acres.
Okay.
Okay.
Take your
Okay,
question back,
let's-
Ron, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Anybody else on the board have any questions?
Carol,
Joe,
I
this
just
is
come back-
fine. Go ahead, Ron.
Carol, I just want to come back to Ron's point about what they're expecting from DP on the LOI.
Yes.
Ron, it sounded like you made, you anticipated the more restrictive buffer from DEP. Is there something that would mitigate the resource value you've ascribed to this, or is there, or are you expecting those buffers to expand?
The exhibit I'm showing you right here, this is what I'm expecting them to be. The 150 foot in some areas, the 50 foot in other areas.
Okay.
The plans we submitted primarily have 50 foot based on the initial discussions we had, or not me, but the environmental consultant that was hired for the project had with DEP. At the end of the process, or near the end of the process, because we're not done with the process yet, that the folks at DEP took some areas and had them as 150 foot and other areas only as 50 foot. And in detail, it was areas that were in the same watershed. So it wasn't, you know, to me, it was a little arbitrary, but that's what happened in this process. But it wasn't like the hoop stick was one and the middle was the other. In the hoop stick watershed, we have some areas that are 0, some areas that are 50, and other areas that are 150.
So will that be made more consistent? I'm sorry, it's Scott Zupnik.
Well, it's not consistent, but what we have to do is update those plans for those new numbers, and then we can give you the new resource calculations. My expectation is we're not going to change lot lines. We're not going to change the road layout. We're not going to change the components of the design, but what we're going to have to do is just redo those calculations. And there's a couple of those lots that need relief of those resource conservations, and those numbers are simply just going to change.
Madam Chair, if I could step in here for a second.
Yeah, go right ahead, Paul.
I think to bring it home, if Ron had originally assumed everything was a 50-foot buffer, and now, for example, on the Hoopstick Brook, he has a 150-foot buffer, that's probably where we're going to see the biggest change. Because as he stated, under the Resource Constraints Ordinance, that conservation easement is not excluded. However, the buffer in there, which is now 150 feet, is substantially larger than it was before.
Right. Okay, anybody else on the board have any questions for Ron?
Quick question, Carol. This is Jeff.
Yes.
So I'm looking at the lot 15 there, and I guess I probably know the answer of it already. But Ron, is that a footbridge that's connecting those two pieces of that lot currently?
Yeah, it's more aggressive than that. I drove over it with my truck today and looking at a couple of things. So it's I'll call it a farm bridge that was built. It's actually a 6 to 8 inch thick concrete slab that was built some time ago. No sidewalls. It's only about 12 foot wide. And I'm assuming that used to bring farm equipment back and forth on it. That's
the only access to the other part of the property at this point, right? Because the stream just cuts the property in half.
And in our last application in 2017, we said that wasn't adequate for the project when we had a lot in the front, proposed a lot in the back, and we proposed a new crossing that we'd have to build a culvert or a bridge under today's standards, which certainly wouldn't be what's there today.
Right.
So we would have to go to DEP and get a new crossing permit to do that. The application we're presenting to you tonight would have the lot in the same area, but we're going to eliminate that crossing. I think there's an environmental benefit that we're not going to do that. We're going to come in from the back.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the intent.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board member?
Yeah, Ron, quick question for you. The lot whose soil logs didn't pass, can you show it on this map?
Yeah, right about here.
Got it.
And it wasn't that they didn't pass, Colin. It was the issue of where we found acceptable soils at the time is less than 50, or it's greater than 50 foot away from the wetlands, which is allowed by DEP. But your ordinance, Bedminster's ordinance, enhances that and says, you know, we want to be 100 foot away from any wetland. We don't want to be 50 foot away. And in that case, we discussed that with the board. They're very uncomfortable granting relief of that. And that's where the decision was made that we would go out and test now farther away from that wetland, not in that area. Even though it complied with the DEP rules for a septic system, it didn't comply with your rules. So it was a passing test. It was just not in the place that the board felt comfortable with.
Thank you.
Anyone else on the board?
Carl, I just want to come back to the IRWA conservation.
This is who is this, Colin?
It's Larry.
Oh, Larry, sorry.
So, Ron, what's the nature of that conservation easement?
It generally limits, you know, clear cutting that could change the characteristics. It allows equestrian uses. It has some agricultural uses that are allowed in there. There's some, you know, it's, I'll say version 1.0 or 1.5 of conservation easements because it was done quite a long time ago. So it doesn't have the 50 pages that would be written in today's conservation easement. But the general intent was they didn't want that land clear cut for agricultural purpose, you know, farming and other things. But they talk about equestrian, they talk about other things that could be done in there, outdoor recreation. Couldn't build a house in there.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else on the board?
Carol, Frank here. If I could just
Yes.
ask Ron.
Yes.
Ron, have you been able to determine, based on the characteristics you know, whether or not you'd get, like, let me ask it a different way. How many lots would you be able to achieve if you didn't have the variances for those frontage arrangements where you don't use your frontage to get access? Is there some variance-free application that would tell us a different number of units, just so the board can understand that?
Yeah, so I'll keep it fairly simple. I look at this, and when we go to the next plan, which is going to be the proposal, I look at this as the analysis because of the configuration of these existing lots, how they relate to one another, how they relate to the land. I tried to break it down into 3 different components. That on lot 12, when I do the calculations, before any adjustments in these new lines, as far as the environmental constraints, I come up with 5 lots that you could do in the rear of this property. 5 lots that you can do per your calculations. When we go down and look at lot 15, on what was approved already, it was like 1.6, 1.7 lots. And we got a variance from you on that back in 2017. And then when I go over to lot 21, I think it's 1.6 lots that are on lot 21. So I look at it as 3 separate calculations. I can put it all together, and you can see that on the charts that I started doing already that were on the cover sheet. But I looked at it almost as 3 different calculations, because they are 3 distinct, separate, even though they're connected by small segments, a couple hundred feet between 15 and 12, 150 feet between 12 and 21. And again, our intent is to connect the rear lot, which is lot 12, which today it doesn't have frontage on an approved street. It has access through an adjoining family property that the original family had on lot 23, which I'm pointing to up in the upper left of the sheet. And that was their access. So the intent is to use the existing driveway on 21, extend that driveway into the rear of lot 12, or not the rear, but the rear of the project and on lot 12, and use that as a rural lane under RSIS standards that has been consistent to what we've done in other projects in Bedminster Township.
Thanks, Ron.
Okay, unless anyone else has the board, I'm going to open it up to the public for any questions. Janine, let me know if you see anybody.
They're muted.
Ms. Norton is trying to get somebody's attention over there.
Susanna Norton, you have to unmute yourself.
You just unmuted.
Okay,
Okay.
go ahead.
Ask the engineer, please, anything up to this point. We'll continue on with further, but up to this point about the
Carol,
wetlands or the conservation. Go ahead.
Carol, there was public comment. It's Susanna Norton. She just had to
I
unmute.
didn't hear what you said, Carol.
Okay. I'm Susanna Norton. I own the property that is called Stonebridge Farm that borders on lot 12, and I'm concerned about the...
Susanna, please raise your right hand. This is Mr. Collins now, the board attorney. Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. And please spell your name, both first and last name, and give us your address.
Okay. My first name is Sassona. It's spelled S like Sam, A, S like Sam, S like Sam, O, N like Nancy, A. Last name is Norton, Norton. The address is Stonebridge Farm, 15 Elizabeth Lane, Bedminster 07921.
Thank you.
I'm concerned about the construction that it will be on one side of my property, outside, of course, the property line. And I would like first to find out how far a construction can take place from a property line of another neighbor.
Well, we haven't even seen the lot lines yet. So we have any questions about the wetlands or the conservation easement right now?
No, I just,
Okay.
just want to add one thing that
Yes.
both Middlebrook and Hoopstick Brook and joined together at the end, the other end of Stonebridge Farm, and they depend a lot on what's going to happen in the treatment of those brooks on lot 12. I just want to make sure that nothing that is going to be done to it, if any, is going to affect the life of the brooks that runs through my property.
Okay, I think we'll be getting to that later as Ron continues his presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody else from the public want to speak about the specific issues?
Questions for this testifier, right, Chair?
Yes. Okay. Janine, do you see anyone else?
No, I do not see anyone else that has a hand raised or
I
anything
actually
of
have one
that.
question.
Okay.
Question,
Who
Tim
is that?
Walter.
Oh, Tim.
Tim Walter.
Okay.
Ron, I know that the DEP just classified a lot of the streams. I don't know if there were streams or a lot had to do with in Bedminster. I think it was class 3. They upgraded a lot of them. That this is not affecting any of these.
No, the areas that you're talking about were along the Lamington River. They went
Yeah.
and reclassified a series of sections to C1, Category 1 waters.
Okay, gotcha.
And it was generally, I'll say, the lower portion of the Lamington River, from the Lamington Road area south as it gets to the north branch of the Raritan River.
Okay, so these weren't affected.
Area. And these two stream corridors do not go into the Lamington River watershed. They go, they connect, as Norton said, they connect just south of her property, or on the southern portion of her property, and then get discharged directly into the north branch of the Raritan. So these two corridors are not C1 waters, and that reclassification is going on more on the southwest portion of Bedminster Township.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Okay, not seeing anyone else, we'll close it to the public for now, and we'll continue on, Ron. Your next exhibit.
Okay, so the next exhibit is the actual, now that we showed where it was in the surrounding environment, we showed the environmental constraints, and now we're going to show the actual subdivision layout. We can go through setbacks and the other elements that some board members and the public brought up.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to get the title when it regenerates. So, Tom, it's subdivision layout rendering, June 11th, 2020. I guess we call it A3.
Yes.
So I'll give a quick overview, and then we'll go into each lot itself, the existing lots, because that's how I viewed this.
Yes.
Is the layout based on the environmental constraints, based on the intent to develop, based on what Jim's vision was for the property, is we wanted to reuse the existing driveway that comes in on lot 21 to the house that it currently exists on 21, extend that where my pointer is now to the rear of that, generally make a right-hand turn and head in a westerly direction with that driveway, and then terminate it somewhere out in that field. And then around there, have a series of new house sites, new lots in the rear. And again, based on the calculations we did, 5 lots were proposed. Then we went, and I'll go to each of the other 2 lots. On lot 21, and give it a second to regenerate.
Now, Ron, the proposed lot lines are the ones in orange, correct?
They are. The perimeter still of the track boundaries are in yellow, but the proposed interior lot lines are in orange.
Could you go through each lot, Ron, before you go into detail? Could you show the lot lines for the proposal?
And I'll take it into each one. So lot 21 is a 23-acre parcel, and it's the outline here in yellow that I'm pointing to. So it goes all the way from Lamington Road, comes all the way back, and then it gets long and skinny.
So that's one lot.
That's an existing lot, and we're proposing to subdivide that in half and have it basically a 12-acre lot and a 10.5-acre lot. And the lot line would come down along the road, come out to Lamington Road. And what we would propose to do is keep the existing house where it is. Very nice house. It's actually under renovation by Jim Downs right now. So we keep that house, keep the barn that's the back. There's a shed back there. Keep that. And then on the new 10-acre lot that would be to the east, we would propose a new house there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's 2 lots of the 23 acres. They would both comply to the lot acreages, the setbacks, all those elements. The only thing it wouldn't comply is this lot 21, what remains the lot 21, doesn't meet your lot circle calculation of 500 feet. That's a variance under your definition. So that would be a deviation from the standards. We can get the lot circle to work fine in the new lot, 21.04, but remaining lot 21, because it's long and skinny, that wouldn't comply. If we go over to lot 15, existing lot 15, and again, simple rectangular lot that we have here, the proposal would be having a new lot line that would bisect it, but it would be not perfectly straight. It would come off at an angle around the pond and come back again. So again, the primary issue here is we wanted to keep the pond, which was on the north side of the stream. We want to keep that pond with that lot and not have the lot line right through the pond. That would be uncomfortable for someone that owns that. So you see an interesting little lot line. And because of frontage, with your ordinance requiring 50 feet, we bought a flagstaff all the way out to Lamington Road. The change from the application you saw in 2017 to today would be, we would propose no access across, a new access for a driveway across the stream, that we would come in from the rear lot, from lot 12. So we think there's an environmental benefit of not having that stream crossing, and we would just have a single driveway coming into a new house on this front side of that lot 15. That lot would be the same size that was in the previous approval. We wouldn't change the lot lines that were previously approved. So it was 10.8 acres in the front lot, and it was 10.8 acres in the back lot. So it would conform. The existing lot is just over 500 foot in diameter or across. So if I draw a lot circle, it meets 500 foot. When I put the 50-foot flag stem to the rear lot in order to meet your definition of lot frontage to a public street, then we don't meet the 50 foot. And we asked for and received in 2017 a reduction in the lot circle down to, I think it was 464 feet instead of 500 foot. Same issue, no change to that relief that we're asking for. Again, the only difference in this application on lot 15 would be no stream crossing. We would come in from the rear. I think that's a better way to come in. We also had agreed in that first application, you'll see this white line here, the dash line, that is the setback lines, 200 to the front yard, 100 foot to side yard, and 100 foot to the rear yard. What we agreed to in that initial application, and Jim still agrees to in this application, is that we would double the setback as a requirement. So we don't have a building, and certainly not an attractive building that everyone sees going by Lamington Road that sits there now. And we would go and set that back a minimum of 400 foot from Lamington Road. So driving by the streetscape, if this project was approved this way, you'd actually have a better streetscape, because what everyone considers not an attractive house sitting there now within 200 foot of the front yard property line, we'd have a new house that would be a minimum of 400 foot to the rear.
So that's planned to be demolished? That's
existing
planned to
house.
be demolished?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's abandoned
Okay.
right now, but it hasn't been demolished yet. Certainly we do that, but after we would have entitlements for that.
So Ron, in terms of another aspect of the variance application, you're saying that the scenic aspect of what you've just described would be another reason why the board might be inclined to grant a variance.
Well, yes, definitely. And again, I think that's one of the big benefits of what we're talking about here, especially when we start talking about lot 12, is we're trying to use techniques like we've used in other applications in Bedminster, where there's no new driveways going out to Lamington Road. We have an existing driveway that's hideous right now that we would move over to the right side to comply with the standard, but there would only be this existing driveway. We'd have to do some minor widening of that driveway to comply with the RSIS standard for a rural lane from 12 foot to 18 foot, but there'd be no change along that road other than an enhancement. A building that's considered not attractive, that's less than 200 foot, and we would have a building that would be 400 foot at a minimum away. And as we said in the last application, the grade is high on Lamington Road, and it actually falls off towards the stream corridor. So the contours are on here, but this grade around the proposed, or generally the proposed house site, is about 20 vertical feet lower than where the existing house is now. So again, it goes down in elevation and it moves back farther. When we talk about any new improvements on lot 21, if a house was built back in this area on new 21.04, it would be 1,400 feet back from Lamington Road. You're not going to see it. It's wooded all in the front here. So Frank, to your point, is driving by Lamington Road, if this project was approved and built, you wouldn't notice any difference. Actually, you notice an enhancement because of what we did on 15. And then no new driveways out to the road.
And Ron, the other thing that the board has to consider as part of this, as a countervailing consideration, is from the, put your other hat on, as the guy driving the fire truck, what concerns should we or should we not have to have about this configuration?
Well, I think the main thing is the consistency of the 18-foot wide driveway. That's the rural lane standard that's there. And you have many properties that have been subdivided in the last 30 years in Bedminster that have the use of driveways or roads, private roads, that have 4, 5, and 6 lots that are on those roads. And 18-foot, I believe, is a good standard. When you start getting down to a Harding Township standard, we only have 12-foot, that makes it tough for 2 trucks to pass each other. 18-foot is manageable, and that would be something that feel comfortable in doing.
Thank you.
Ron, what are you proposing to finish this road? Is this going to be gravel or paved?
Well, we're showing it as paved for the approval. We'll look about some other techniques that may give some balance to that may have a better aesthetic appearance. And it could be some other techniques that you can use with stone dusting on top of pavement to make it look more rural, more agricultural. But I think from the design standpoint, we want to make sure that we're designing it to a paved standard. It has all the drainage associated with paved, that we're not taking any exemption for stone. It is not a steep road. There's no sections like I think on McMurtry Farm when we did that. We had a fair amount of sections that were over 5%, and I believe your standard is you had to pave over 5 or 7. I forget what that standard was, that you had to pave the road. So that's a mix and match. Some's paved and some stone that's in there. But
now, are you proposing this as a private road, or are you looking for the town to take this road?
Totally private. No.
Totally private.
Yeah. No.
So you would have an association of some sort to pay for the maintenance?
Yes, we would. Yeah, and not only the maintenance of the road, but because the road is in an area that's not disturbed or paved now, there's going to be a series of stormwater management improvements that will be required for this. Mm-hmm. So not only would it be the element of the road, but it would also be all the common stormwater management features associated with this roadway.
Okay, we've accounted for 4 lots. You want to continue on the lot lines for the other lots?
Certainly. So in the rear, we have the rear portion of the property, which is lot 12. And again, the design element was continue on lot 21, that existing driveway past, I'll call it the Vreeland house, but the house that's on lot 12, continue that driveway or rural lane, turn, in this case, 90 degrees, where my pointer is now, come across the property line, and then have a cul-de-sac at the end. And in that case, we would have a series, what's shown on the plans now, of 5 individual lots that would be around generally the center or those fields that exist on the rear portion of the property. You can see the lot lines are unconventional because what we are doing is showing 50-foot frontages to each of the roadway or the rural lane itself. And then we also have to show, and it's blue, hard to see on this plan, but blue is the lot circles for each lot. So we're managing to do the lot circles on each lot for each of these. And we have a configuration that 50 foot comes out to the easement that will become the rural lane that will be shared by everyone. And it, in this case, it handles 6 separate lots, the 5 on lot 12, and then the additional lot on what we call 1501. You'll also see on this exhibit the areas that are in white rectangles, and I'll blow up something. That is the areas of the primary and secondary septic system testing for each one of these. So I believe, Colin, you asked before about this lot, and that's where it's too close. It's within, that's the 50-foot setback for the wetlands, and your ordinance says 100 foot, so that's the area that we would change. So truly in this application now is these two lots, 1207 and 1206 would be combined together until we come back and get some better testing. That we did some already. And
Say that again, Ron. Which lot is in jeopardy?
well, the lot of 1206, oh, let's regen it. Okay, there we go. So 1206 was the one the board said deferred and said that they're not approving that until we have testing that was more than 100 foot away from the wetlands. So we're out there doing those tests as we speak. So for this portion of the application is 1206 would be combined with 1207, and this lot line would go away and it would be one larger lot.
Okay. All right.
Right. And then
Okay.
additionally, on a typical plan like this, we show in the white lines is the setbacks, the 100-foot side yard, the 200-foot front yard setbacks, and we're considering the front yard to the rural lane setbacks for that. So you can see the house sites, they're 100 foot or 200 foot back from the front and 100 foot back from the side. So I believe there was a question from the public, Ms. Norton, about that property and her adjoining property. And the closest house would be this one house here on lot 1207, and it would need to be a minimum of 100 foot away from that property line.
Okay. All right, I'm going to open it up to the board. Go ahead.
Ron, I got a
Madam
question.
Chair, I've got a question, if I could, please.
Yes, please, Paul.
I think I heard, and Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, you've looked at lot 15, and based on your resource constraints calculations, it comes out to be 1.9 lots, so we'll call it 2. And lot 21 came out to be 1.6, and we'll call it 2. And lot 15 or lot 12 is something, and we'll call it 5. I think two things that I think I'd like to have some input from the board on. Number one, should this be considered as a single overall parcel where you do the overall resource constraints on the entire thing rather than rounding up each of the individual parcels? That's the first question. And number two, is there value to the board to see a lot layout that is completely conforming, not only with resource constraints, but with setbacks, 500-foot circles, those sorts of things? Because there's a number of variances scattered throughout this. And generally, we're used to seeing a conforming plan, and then that is compared against the desired plan, and the desired plan makes more sense than the conforming, but it doesn't create more lots.
Or if it does create more lots, if I could just add to that, it does it because there are counter.
No sound.
No sound. Yeah, we lost the sound. Was that Tom you're speaking?
No, that was Frank.
No,
Oh,
That was Frank.
Okay. We lost your
Frank,
sound. Go ahead.
Frank, why don't you repeat what you said?
I'm just basically saying that as you evaluate these variances, I think Paul's point was, if we looked at a completely conforming plan, it probably would not come close to achieving this number of lots. And you might think, then if you want to show me an alternate plan that can achieve the same number of lots but needs variances, we should be receptive to that. And my point was only, depending upon the benefits, you might even allow more lots because of the benefits. In this particular plan, for instance, coming in from the backside of the previously subdivided lot without having to make that crossing, that's one of those environmental benefits that Ron cited that I think you can count on. But it looks to me a little bit like the variances here are actually helping maximize the opportunity for development to the greatest number of lots, where the master plan certainly and the zoning permit certain things. And as Paul said, we need to know what that is, but we also need to compare this. And if there's going to be more development permitted in this farmland area, what are those countervailing benefits that make the board want to grant that?
So it's Larry. So after listening to Frank, I go back to what Paul's comment was. If we're looking for baseline of what a conforming application would be for the 114 acres, you know, that becomes our baseline to compare and weigh the merits of the variances that are being requested, and whether they, you know, as Frank is indicating, whether it's, hey, these are great variances, it's better for the township. I would like to see what that looks like.
Yes, that makes total sense so that we can judge it. Mhm.
And to Paul's comment about treating, rather than treating this as 3 separate parcels, treating it as 114 acres, I would also follow Paul's recommendation to see what that looks like.
If I could just opine on that briefly, it was submitted as a tract of 114 whatever acres. So that's the nature of the application now. If they decided at their volition, and I think they probably, I'm not the lawyer, but they probably have the right to do that. If they said, well, wait a minute, we're going to pull this apart because we already have 2 lots approved over here, because those were approved, right? So they have those rights. Then the question would be, what can you do with the rest of the property? And when you merge it all together, is the benefit of getting to that back lot and any other benefits they offer sufficient to warrant thinking about a greater development plan rather than a lesser one?
The only thing, when I get into math on this, just so I tell you how we would look at that, if I took Paul's premise, and we can do that, this is just math at this point, is that the one item that I would probably take off the math because it hurts the calculation would be this lot 15, which I already have relief on already, that's under those lots. So I would say, all right, well, wait a minute, that's going to hurt by adding a deficiency already that we already received the variance on to those calculations. My numbers are going to look worse. So we'll have to decide that if we take that off. But clearly, we think there's a benefit for having the house on still generally the same location and have the driveway go out to this common driveway as opposed to go across the stream. But if I start taking all 3 existing tracks and take those numbers in, that's going to, because of the environmental constraints on a 20-acre lot, that's going to make this affect the other lots more negative.
Ron, it's Larry. You may be absolutely right, but just as you talked about that, having that lot, what is it? 150, is that
15?
Which one, Larry? The rear lot of 15?
Was that 1501 in the back?
1501, yeah, 1501.
1501, right. So seeing that, the juxtaposition of the fully conforming lot, and whether you treat it as, you take lot 15 and say this is already the existing approval, yeah, that becomes a basis for us to evaluate the merits of the variance. Right, so I mean, I understand that it may look worse, but the benefits of having the driveway come in through the back may justify that for the board.
Larry, I think you're also, maybe we're talking around a little bit, but the master plan objective would be that we retain farmland to the greatest extent practicable. And so the implication for a variance request that would maximize development potential would be that it overcomes the objective that we would keep as much farmland as we can in agricultural use.
Well, I don't think we're there yet. I think that's.
I'm not suggesting you are. I'm just trying to set the test.
No, I understand. And Ron, I do have I come back to the conservation easement with IRWA.
Yep.
Anything in that conservation easement regarding subdivisions?
Well, we're not showing any driveways, any septic systems, or any houses.
So there was no prohibition against subdividing that conservation area?
No. Okay. No. But as you've heard from Jim, not only tonight, in the past, there's the notion that the farming activities, including, you know, silviculture activities here, is still part of a bigger idea that would happen, but it's not in the context of a subdivision where we're showing lot lines, driveways, and septic systems and stormwater management features. But yeah, Jim's put together plans that have uses that would be consistent with the easements that would be back in this area, more on the agricultural farming side.
So you would have, no matter what, each subdivision in that back, those back parcels, those, what it looks like,
5.
Well, the 3 parcels impacted by the ERWA easement.
Yeah.
So you now whack up the 1 easement and it gets carried over to each of the 3 lots.
Correct.
And with the, and this is probably something that I guess Jim is going to talk to, the farming rights to those parcels. Are those farming rights, how are they being managed between the property owners? Is this through a homeowner? I mean, this gets back to Carol's point. Is that similar to the driveway or road, that this is a homeowner association that has the farming rights on those 3 parcels, or is it a separate easement or license agreement between the property owners?
Well, I'll let Jim to speak to that, but I look at it when we talked to Jim in the past about this as almost 2 different layers of elements. There'd be the hard layer that would be the rights or the easements associated with the driveway, the drainage structures, the common subdivision improvements that would be part of this association for common maintenance of those things. That's one layer, one level. The separate level would be the agreements or easements of farming and shared agricultural farming activities over the top. But I almost look at them as 2 distinct things, because one's a must. You got to maintain the road, you got to maintain the drainage basins, you got to maintain what's common in order to have an individual lot consistent with your standards. The other one is additional enhancements to the property that are a neighborhood that Jim is anticipating created with some of those shared agricultural activities. But I see it as almost 2 layers, not 1.
And Ron, I think what I was saying before is that because variances are involved, if the master plan would try to anticipate less development and the creation of a neighborhood would not necessarily be the thing that the master plan hopes to accomplish, I think that the variance testimony has to demonstrate that there are compelling reasons why that plan for the R10 zone should be somehow modified so that we get more development rather than less. And I don't mean less than you're permitted, right? You're allowed to get lots that meet all the requirements and the lot circles and everything else. And you'll show us a plan that tells us how many of those there are. I hope when you're done that there also could be compelling benefits for this plan that made the board think that more development in this particular case made more sense, because I think that's what you're trying to tell us. I'm pretty sure that's what you're saying.
I get it.
Anyone else
ask,
on the board?
which are the lots that are undersized in this plan?
So in this case, Nick, every lot that's shown on this plan is in excess of your minimum lot size of 10 acres. Okay,
So no undersized lots.
So, I got this one's, I'll go just on the back portion, just so everyone's clear. It's lot 12.09 is 13 acres. 12.08 is 15.9 acres. 12.07 is 14 acres plus 12.06, which is 12. So if we combine these two, it's a 26 acre lot. Lot 12 is 12.6 acres. So they all comply in the size of lots. All the 5 lots in the rear of the property on lot 12 all comply with the lot circles. So the dimensions, they all comply with the setback requirements. So that all complies from that standpoint. When we go to lot 21, we meet the lot acreages, 12 acres, 10 acres, it's 10.5 acres. The new lot 12.04 meets the lot circle. The existing house site, because it's long and skinny, doesn't. So that's a variance that we need, but it meets the lot size.
Right.
Lot frontage requirements, and likewise down here on 15, both meet the size requirements. The rear lot meets the circle because the width of the entire tract is only just over 500 feet. It doesn't meet lot circle for the remaining lot here. So it meets
Okay.
all the lot areas. That's not an issue. I need to redo the calculations to show what we meet and what we don't meet with the environmental constraints, the resource calculations. Not a variance, it's a design waiver, but still a deviation from your standards. What I don't want to profess tonight is I don't have those final calculations because of the issues associated with the changes to some of the buffers and getting the final wetlands determination.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the board?
Yeah, if we look at lot
One at a
21.
time.
I'm sorry. It's
Go
Larry
ahead.
again.
Yes, go ahead.
So if you look at, was that lot 21?
The back lot? Yeah.
No,
Oh,
I'm
no. 21, sorry.
No, the where the existing house is that Jim is working on.
21.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So we're looking at lot 21. Right, so the only way lot 21 would conform with the radius is if you didn't have that extra lot, that new lot.
Correct. You keep basically the 23-acre lot.
Right.
Yeah, and again, no matter what lot lines I drew on that, there's no way, just geographically, I can get two 500-foot circles.
Got it. Okay.
There's not a chance, of that because of the configuration of the project or property. It's not going to happen.
Got it.
Another board member?
I just have one question. So all of this gerrymandering of these lots is ordered to minimize the number of variants? Because what useful purpose is these flagstick lots that you've described, Ron?
I mean, Rich, it goes back to is you can't see a lot line driving down Lamington Road, correct? Right? You can't see a lot line driving down a driveway. But there's been the years I've been doing these subdivisions here, when you look at a tax map, you scratch your head and say, why is the lot lines like that? And for the most part, you've respected the 50-foot frontage requirement to the public road, and you've respected the 50-foot frontage requirement to a private road or rural lane. And I can show you examples that we've been involved over many applications that you employed those types of techniques. And what it really resulted in is that when I drive down Pottersville Road, when I drive down Long Lane, when I drive down Black River Road, you see a driveway that goes up that looks like it goes to a single family residence, but there could be 3 or 4 residences behind there. You don't know that, for the most part. And if you're in a helicopter, you know it, but you don't know that. And I think the intent of that general policy is protect the streetscape, allow development, but protect the streetscape. So in this case, it looks funny, but it was in that same intent of this layout is protect the streetscape and use these ability to have these driveways that are rural lanes for your access, and having these 50-foot stems coming out to roads like Lamington Road.
On 15, you actually turn the corner with that flagstick along the street, along Lamington Road, right?
Well, no, it's 50 foot, and then whatever the remaining is, 460 feet along Lamington. So it's just a 50 foot right here where my pointer is, and then I think it's 460 is the rest.
So that 50 feet between the street and that orange line isn't part of 1501, is it?
Yeah, we go to 1501. And typically what we do with that is we write an agreement over the top of it that these folks here, the rear lot 1501, doesn't have any use of that land, and that 15 maintains it.
Okay.
We've done that many times. I got a lot on Long Lane that there's 4 or 5 driveways that go off of that, and we gave those rights so it looks normal, doesn't look.
Yeah, it just seems so arbitrary, especially in that case where you have a 50-foot frontage on Lamington Road, but actually the building, the property is going to be accessible through lot 12. So
Yeah.
the frontage is at the back.
It is. And again, it goes back to there's this notion that you need, the lot needs to be touched on improved street.
Okay. All
That's
right.
a premise of the municipal land use law.
Seems a little.
I could take a 50-foot stem and put that along here and come out to this road too.
This looks like you were trying to get a few votes in your district.
Lou, I think you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I have a few questions. I really didn't hear Mr. Downs' introduction that well. It was very muffled. I couldn't really hear him, so hopefully we'll get back to him regarding his concept for revision for this neighborhood in terms of agriculture. But one point that Frank made earlier was that one of the goals of our master plan is to preserve farmland. And Ron, as I look at this, I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a minute. It appears to me between the wetland constraints and the wooded areas, the prime farmland is really being used for the homes and the driveways. Would you agree with that?
Well, under a view like this, Lou, I agree. What you need to hear is Jim's vision and what he expects to accomplish of using the aggregated farm fields to be managed as one element, that we don't see these, fences and other elements that start going along each one of these orange lines that are out here, that there's
Lou,
communal aspects.
this is Frank. Lou, if I could just add, I really don't want to prejudice the applicant's ability to make that case. Part of what I was saying before was we have these objectives. He started out trying to tell us that he had a vision for that. I never heard it either, so we'll wait to hear it. But we didn't prejudge anything there.
Well, no, I agree with that. I think that Ron's explanation was very helpful, because if you have some kind of agreed upon relationship for farming and you're not building fences, then this all might work. Okay, that's it.
Anyone else from the board?
Carol, it's Larry. If I can come back.
Yes.
So Ron, the size and shape of these lots, and I just want to follow up on if you could actually draw back on the on this plan. Great. So the size of the lots that are being proposed, I just want to put them into perspective of surrounding lots. There was the neighbors on Elizabeth Lane, perhaps down Larcher Cross, other lots on Lamington, and what those sizes are. And just as you mentioned that this is not uncommon for Bedminster, but I would like to see how this layout and these parcels look compared to some of the other parcels that you had mentioned.
All right, so let's I'm going to go back to exhibit. I believe it was A1. And yeah, see, I don't have all the lot lines on here, but I can do it on another exhibit. There's some.
Well, if you do, by the way, if you do have your title, your sheet 1 of 14, you've got some of that.
Yeah, I don't have that on the screen, Larry. I can pull up.
Okay.
But I can add to this exhibit. So I can say this is the lots, the 3 lots that are directly to the right of and west of lot 15. Those 3 lots, it was an existing house and we subdivided that in 2 separate lots. They're each just about 10 acres that are adjoining that are right in here. And again, similar environmental constraints, a stream corridor along here, stream corridor along there. I think I did that property 30 years ago. There was maybe wetlands. There's certainly no flood hazard areas. So you don't have the same restrictions when we got that subdivision approved that you do today. So that's subdivided to your zoning standards right now. The 2 lots at the corner of Lamington and larger crossroad. One's vacant, one has a house on it. They're both undersized lots that are there right now. This long skinny lot wouldn't comply today, but it's an undersized, it's not undersized, undershaped lot, but it doesn't have a house on it. There's larger houses. Ms. Norton talked about her lot there. That's a very large tract of land that's through here. You got the big graph property back here, larger lot. This lot, I forget the name that's on that, undersized lot, under 10 acres, that's under there. This lot, I believe it's one of the Chrisman lots that complies. It's probably an oversized lot that's there. So this lot that's at the corner, not one property down, that's probably about 12 acres. You know, so you got, there's big lots and there's little lots. You go across the street and on Lamington Road, and when you get on that side, now we got, you know, Woody Johnson's in hundreds and hundreds of acres. Behind that's Dunwalk, hundreds and hundreds of acres. Large lots that are over there, but then we have undersized lots that are just next to it across from the Trump driveway. And you got 3 acres and 6 acre lots there. You get down to Copperthwaite and on Lamington, you got half acre lots. You know, it changes a lot in this neighborhood. It's not totally homogeneous.
Great.
And I can bring an exhibit in that shows, you know, all the neighborhood lot configuration.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else on the board have anything for the engineer? Okay. Paul, do you have anything further you want to talk about?
Not at this point. I think I raised my point about some additional information we need.
Okay.
I think for the board to make his determination.
And Frank?
No, not right now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, good. Then I'll open it up to the public. Janine, did we see anybody?
No, I am looking on both screens. I don't see anyone who has a hand raised or is looking at me and waving their hand. No public comment.
Okay, so I think you answered the question for Ms. Norton. Okay, I'll close it to the public. And you want to continue, Ron?
Truly, that's for tonight. That's my presentation. That's the, you know, existing conditions, the environmental constraints, and the proposed layout.
Okay. Okay.
Madam Chair, would you like us to bring Mr. Downs back just to explain the
Yes, that's what I was going to suggest, that we bring Mr. Downs back and see if we can hear him. I think that would be helpful.
Mike, if I could just ask, I think Mr. Downs has a vision that I started to get a sense of before we lost him. If there could be something written that gives us all an opportunity to look ahead of time at what it is he wants us to understand, I think he'd do a lot better than taking a shot with 5 minutes in front of the board, if you know what I mean.
Understood. That's fine, because we do have to, again, we're going to have the new calculations that Ron's going to have to put on the plan, so we're going to have to be back at the next meeting. So we could do that then if that's the board's desire.
And I do think that some of the board members sensed that he was trying to tell us that he had a vision related to agriculture that we care about. So I think that's really what he's going to want to tell us more about.
Okay.
Good idea, Frank. Thank you.
Oh, thank you all.
Mr. Levy?
Yes.
Yes. Is there anything else you want to discuss now?
No, I think at this point, we just like to, unless the board wanted to give us an indication, if they think they have enough information to give us an indication, if they think this is something they would entertain. Otherwise, we can just get their plans revised and get those in for the next meeting.
Well, I think we do have some missing information. Obviously, the wetland situation, this Board of Health issue. So hopefully you'll be able to get those major issues resolved for the next meeting.
Yes. Agreed.
Okay. So I guess we want to carry our meeting. Tom?
Yes, please.
Yes, we want to carry it to a date certain, and I don't know the schedule. Janine and Paul, any suggested dates?
The next meeting is July 9th. We also have Rilocate on that night. Board's determination whether you want to do them both together.
Yes, otherwise it's August 6th.
What about timing?
Like
I'll go back to Ron.
one night.
I'll go back to Ron. What do you think about timing?
I'm sorry.
Ron, I don't hear you.
I know. I was trying to find my unmute button. It hit on me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'd say it's only going to take me a few weeks to get this back in. So even if you had the meeting on, what was that, the July 9th date?
July 9th.
Yeah, I can get it in 10 days prior to the application being heard.
And Ron, when you say get it in, you mean the conforming plan that would show us what number of lots we could have?
Well, I think it's a little, yes. Yeah, that's one component, but I think it's also the updating the calculations, updating the plans, some of the comments that you and Paul had raised. I think it would be a little of everything.
And Ron, you'll have your wetlands LOI back by then? I don't think so.
It's sitting there waiting to get signed. I mean, it's signed off by Mark Harris is next to impossible. He's approved it already, and it's waiting for a supervising signature. So, I mean, we are disappointed it's not in our hands already. Okay. But all the field work's done. The changes have been made to the plans. The permit's written, or LOI, it's written. He's signed off on it. It's just waiting for supervision signature.
And Ron, your anticipation is that you will have gone back to the Board of Health with those borings?
We are. I mean, that's the anticipation. We've done testing. We actually had it inspected today by the town of some of the pit bale tests that we have in the upper sections more than 100 foot away. So we got decent results there. And if we can get the timing right where we can make that application or the amendment to it and get it into the Board of Health, we would hope to be heard by then.
And Carol, real quick, since Rockade is Board of Adjustment, and Colin and I are not really quite sure where Relocate stands, is how much more time do you have with Relocate?
Well, that's a good question. They came pretty well unprepared. And so I'm hoping that they're going to take our comments and give us some good answers so that we can, get through it. But we could maybe do this application first on the 9th so that you and Colin could leave. We could do it that way. If Ron thinks he can get it, all accomplished, what he needs.
Paul, do you think both can be done on the same night?
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends how far we go with each one. I think, frankly, I would put them both on. And, what happens sometimes is one person comes in is either very quick or very long, and the other person goes home, or somebody is unable to do it one night. I would schedule them both for the 9th, and we'll see what happens. Already Relocate is there. We can put this on. And if this one goes first because it's a planning board application, I think that makes sense.
Just from a timing perspective, do you need to go back to the Board of Health? Because that meeting would have been for next week, but I think they've canceled because they have nobody applying right now.
That's true. So they won't meet until after.
Correct. Correct.
After the 9th?
After the 9th.
Correct.
They won't meet till July 16th.
Right.
Well, I think that does affect our application, whether we're going to have, how many lots.
Well, I think we can take that risk and knowing I got to do the calculations, so let us figure that out. And if you put us on that date, we submit in time, you get a time to review it. And I'd say that risk is on us, knowing that approval may not be done by then. And we still may be talking about something slightly different. But I think if we do the calculations, make the submission to you and have it in on time, then we can really get some meaningful progress on this by the, what was that date, the 6th, the 9th?
9th, yeah. Okay, so we'll schedule you. I just have one other question for Tom. We had a subcommittee meeting. Tom, are we going to have something from the subcommittee meeting for that night as well?
Maybe. I got to check the dates. So we could try, but let's. This sounds like a pretty busy night with just these two things. I kind of like
Well, that's
doing.
what I'm thinking. We get talked about the ninth, so.
Yeah, I like doing planning a separate night, and that what we're doing is a planning subject. A general planning
Yes,
subject.
right.
So just to be wise and look at budgeting of time.
We'll go to August then for a committee meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, look, if not, I'm not sure what the timing is on getting that memo or that presentation, but that could also be done as a special. I mean, if we're all still living in Zoom land, or we're meeting with the 25% occupancy and 50-person limit, maybe opportunity to meet in person and call it as a special.
What is the occupancy limit of the room, the municipal building room?
You have to talk to the fire. Ron?
I believe it's 135.
650.
No.
No, I don't think so.
I'm not sitting anywhere near Ron, let me tell you that much.
Sell hot dogs.
Okay, so let's schedule the two then for July 9th, the two applications, and we'll try to get our committee meeting scheduled for the 6th of August for our committee and planning. And we can change that, Tom, if you think you want to do it sooner, okay?
Right.
Okay?
So yes,
Madam
that's
Chair.
fine. And what we'll do for the record tonight and for everyone who's listening, this application of Bedminster Farms by the applicant is being carried without additional notices to July 9th at 7 p.m. We're not sure yet whether it'll be remote or in person, but assume that it's, you will, if you want to check, you can check with Janine Daly, the board secretary, before the meeting of the 9th, sometimes a few days before the 9th. She'll also post it on the website, on the bulletin board, and on the website for what type of agenda it is, whether remote or in person. And the applicant, I don't think there's a deadline, but if Mike, if you would confirm an extension of the time frame for action until the end of July 2020, I would appreciate it.
Certainly will.
Thank you. So that's all for this meeting and for our presentations tonight, everyone.
Tom, could I just, for 1 second, I think it would be very helpful for what Ron's going to put together if the board addressed the issue of if he gets to 8.9 or 9.8 or some fractional number of units. If it was a density question, it would be a density variance. But because this is not framed in that context, I don't believe. I think it's just all, it talks about the resource conservation standards as setting the number of lots you're entitled to. So if he thinks that whatever something 0.9 means you get 10, maybe it would be helpful for him to know what he should try to design for. Not so much aspirationally as operationally.
Frank, I'm not really sure I understand the question. I don't
Okay,
think.
so let me say,
I don't think
Tom,
there's any. Yeah,
we'll
I
do
don't think there's.
calculation.
I don't think it's any question that it's not a D variance, a density variance, because there's more than 10 gross acres for every lot. Gross, meaning the land. The resource conservation variances or exceptions that Mr. Kennedy is describing, he's described as site plan subdivision exceptions, which do not trigger a D variance. On the other hand, I don't really think it's as simple as saying, I don't think you can, by any operation of law, round up from 0.9 to 1.0.
That was the whole question, Tom. I think you just gave
in
him
any
the
legal
guidance.
sense. You don't have the right to round up at all. you have to get a deviate. You have to, if you do not meet the resource conservation calculations for any one lot, regardless of whether it is lot 15 and was already subdivided or not, you have to get a subdivision exception under section 51 of the municipal land use law from this board for any lot that needs any site subdivision exceptions, and you need a variance for any lot that needs a variance from the ordinance standards like the 500 feet or front yard or lack of frontage on a improved street. Actually, that's a section 35 variance under the municipal land use law. But I think we aired that out a lot.
Belabor this. I just think Ron just got from you the guidance I was hoping he could get, and assuming that.
Right. And we have to go back to one other thing, and that was somebody, I think Frank raised the question, don't you need to treat it as one track? And the answer is absolutely, you have to treat everything as one track, and you need the variances or exceptions for any lots you seek to subdivide within this major subdivision. You're seeking a major subdivision, and I didn't mention it, and Ron didn't mention it, but I think you need a series of, well, you need relief with the only kind we can grant is de minimis exceptions from the residential site improvement standards. And I will expect Ron to give great proof about that at the next meeting because it didn't come up tonight.
Right, okay.
Okay, everybody, so that's all for
Okay.
this night.
Yes, I think we need a motion to adjourn. Yes?
So moved, Jeff.
Second.
Who
Rich.
seconded?
Was that, Scott, was that you that seconded? Thank
Rich.
you.
It was Rich.
Thank you.
Okay, good night.
You guys are getting pretty good at this, you know.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
We're doing the best we can.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thank you.
Stay safe, all. Good night.
Good night.
Yeah, leave. Just goodbye. Leave meeting. Leave.